Hello, and thank you for joining me today on the Quiet Riot, where we dive a little deeper into film, television, and media. I'm Ainsley, and in today's video, we are discussing Sunset Boulevard. I wanted to preface this by saying you may hear a dog who I cannot tell if he's having like a really good time or a really bad time, and I do have a much better sound setup now, but he may still be caught up on here. And I'm wearing my Property of Miss Lemon television t-shirt right now, just so you know. I'm hers. Um, she's my little sidekick, my little producer of this channel, and I am just, making sure people know it. I'm really excited to talk about Sunset Boulevard with you today. It's one of my favorite movies, and it is directed and written by one of my favorite director-screenwriters, and it also has some of the best as well as the most memorable scenes and lines in film history, and the movie is really important for a number of reasons. It is a black comedy, satire, and film noir that not only satirizes Hollywood, but also has some very important valid criticisms towards Hollywood at the time. And while it specifically discusses and deals with the topic of that transition from the silent era over to sound and how that greatly affected the lives of many actors, it is something that to today's audience, or rather they're someone who works in the industry or just someone in general, can relate to, and specifically how certain changes can affect marginalized people, how it can affect women and such. So I just thought that would be a really important film to discuss for a number of reasons, and that's one of them. Long before the musical, Sunset Boulevard was a movie that criticized Hollywood. A film noir, the movie is shot in flashback and tells the story of a struggling writer who is drawn into the world of a reclusive former actress. While Norma Desmond descends into madness, the main criticism in the film is towards the industry that used her up and threw her away when she was no longer useful. Starring former silent film actress Gloria Swanson as Desmond, Swanson brings the authenticity through her lived experience. Despite being made over 70 years ago, the reality of Sunset Boulevard still rings true. Struggling screenwriter Joe Gillis is having trouble paying his rent and making his car payments, and when his car is trying to be possessed, he ends up spotting them and outruns them and goes into what he believes to be an abandoned garage. He is then called into this mansion and realizes that, oh yeah, somebody else lives here. He is mistaken for a funeral director, and he soon finds out that it is former silent screen actress Norma Desmond who lives there. One of the best aspects of this film is that despite some of it seeming very off the wall, there are moments in this film that are quite realistic. We do know that there are people who have had bukus of money with certain amount of status who have done like crazy things, especially when it comes to animals. There is the movie Babylon, where you have them bringing up an elephant into what is seemingly William Desmond Taylor's big mansion, and there were parties that people would have that exotic animals were a part of it, and we have real stories of that happening as well, and knowledge that people would have chimpanzees. It definitely makes sense when we know who Norma Desmond is, and we get to know her a lot more, that she would have had a chimpanzee. And what makes this movie kind of sad and really adds to the black comedy nature of it is that Norma Desmond is obviously very eccentric, she's very bold, and she's also just very, yeah, eccentric's the word. But we also get to know that she is somebody who is very lonely. She doesn't have a lot of companionship, and that we see that in the way that she acts with Joe Gillis and the various things in which she expects. Now, she also suffers greatly from main character syndrome, as we might call it today, and she, having not made that transition well and is basically now a retired actress who was not willing to take that step, she very much has the nostalgic feelings for that period, and she is left in that mindset of,
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
Widely considered one of the best films ever made, Sunset Boulevard was loved and appreciated by critics and audiences upon its release. The majority, both in and outside of the industry, had great things to say about the film. However, Louis B. Mayer, on the other hand, hated the film, berating Wilder before a round, saying, "You have disgraced the industry that made and fed you. You should be tarred, feathered, and run out of Hollywood." I think that's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but when I read more on this, I also found out that Mayer ended up saying that Wilder should be sent back to Germany. And if you didn't know, Billy Wilder was a refugee. He is a Jewish man who was essentially ran out of Germany because of fascism. And so that Louis B. Mayer, that anyone would say that, but especially Louis B. Mayer, who himself was a Jewish man, to say that. But Louis B. Mayer is just another one of those big personalities that thinks he's right. And Billy Wilder was somebody who was willing to make criticisms on subjects such as this and really pushed a lot of boundaries, especially in the 50s. With his incredible performances, set design, costume design, cinematography, script, and direction, the film impacted the film industry. Sunset Boulevard remains one of the most important films ever made. Sunset Boulevard calls out the superficial nature of Hollywood and the entire film industry, how the industry is destructive, how it picks at your insecurities and eats away at your self-esteem. The grave realities of the film industry are shown through its various characters. While the film's focus is on the effects the transition into sound had on the industry's actors, the film manages to strike a nerve with modern viewers. Norma Desmond, like Gloria Swanson, who portrays her, and other silent film actresses, struggled to make the transition from silent pictures to sound films. This was due in part to the different acting styles and the voices of the actors. Beau, who gained popularity in films like It and Wings, was the Hollywood It Girl, and she is often referred to as the first It Girl. Following the transition to sound, Beau was unable to make it as an actress in the sound era. This was due in part to her thick Brooklyn dialect. As time passed, Beau's mental health began to deteriorate. Mary Pickford, who was one of the 20's most successful actresses, failed to transition. Following her exit from the industry, Pickford went into seclusion, living an isolated life, not unlike Norma Desmond. There were other actresses that inspired the film. Dave Kehr asserted that Norma Talmadge is the obvious, if unacknowledged, source of Norma Desmond, the grotesque, predatory, silent movie queen. Norma Desmond's name is a combination of actress Mabel Normand and director William Desmond Taylor. As a character, Norma Desmond was brought to life by both an incredible performance of Gloria Swanson, but also by the incredible set design and costuming. Through her various costumes and the house that she has built around her, we get to know Norma Desmond and we get to know her mental state. In the 1920s, many film actors lived on Sunset Boulevard. That was actually where the first film studio was built. And Billy Wilder was very fascinated by American culture at the time. He did not live in America then. And when he came to the US for the first time, he went to Sunset Boulevard and he began brainstorming what workers at the time, what actors had been doing at the time, those who were popular in the 1920s and it now being the 1940s, what did they get up to? And that is something that ended up leading to Sunset Boulevard. The film cinematographer stated that Wilder had wanted to do Evelyn Waugh's 1948 novel The Loved One, but couldn't obtain the rights. Waugh's story follows a failed screenwriter who lives with a silent film star and works in a cemetery. Gossip columnist Hedda Hopper wrote, Billy Wilder was crazy about Evelyn Waugh's book The Loved One, and the studio wanted to buy it. Wilder and his frequent collaborator Charles Brackett began working on the script in 1948, but they were not satisfied with the script. In August of 1948, they ended up bringing D.M. Marshman Jr. into the fold. He had previously written for Life, and he was hired to help develop the storyline. Wilder and Brackett were impressed by a critique he provided on their film The Empire Waltz. During the filming, Wilder and Brackett kept the full details of the script from Paramount Pictures. They did this to help them avoid the strict censorship of the time. Joseph Bren was the enforcer of the Hays Code, and they also referred to it as the Bren Code during that time, and he was very strict. Wilder especially was somebody who continuously tried to skirt around those, and that's one of the reasons why he is a big reason why the Hays Code ended up kind of going out of style by 1960 and went out completely at the end of the 60s. And in this movie and the way that they did it, it's definitely no different. They submitted the script a few pages at a time. By the time they were ready to do the film, the script was not entirely finished, and they did not have an ending to the movie. In a 2022 retrospective by The Hollywood Reporter, the Brackett and Wilder script, written in collaboration with D.M. Marshman Jr., is a model of the screenplay form. Dramatic compulsion and emotional Emotional subtlety come even from the choice of words. And when the brittle dialogue is implemented by action, rich in detail and persuasive in pandemonium, the effect is bold drama that introduces the spectator to totally new responses. You want to applaud Sunset Boulevard frame by frame. You want to see individual scenes over. Yet you must go along with its relentless emotional tide that finally stops from sheer exhaustion. I had not watched Sunset Boulevard for quite a while before my last watch that I did. It's one of the things that's always interested me when you watch something in different phases of life, it's what you take from it. And being a little older now, I understand the character of Norma Desmond a lot more, and I empathize with her a lot more. But in the way the script is written and the way that the writers really paid attention to detail, and the detail that the other people involved in the making of this film, including the cinematographer, the set design, the costume design by Edith Head, these little details add into how we as an audience perceive these various different characters in the situation, and so much was done to help us as an audience connect with what is happening. This is a story of Hollywood. This is a story of the film industry at the time, and again, its effects on a specific group of people. But even from today's perspective, and not being in the film industry, you're still able to connect and have that empathy with these characters. In Roger Ebert's 1998 retrospective of the film, he said, "In one of the greatest of film performances, Swanson's Norma Desmond skates close to the edge of parody. Swanson takes enormous chances with theoretical sneers and swoops and posturings, holding Norma at the edge of madness for most of the picture, before letting her slip over. We might not take her seriously. That's where Max comes in. Because he believes, because he has devoted his life to her shrine, we believe. His love convinces us there must be something worth loving in Norma, and that in turn helps explain how Joe can accept her." I never really thought of this movie as having any sort of love story. There are some romantic inclinations in various relationships, but watching it again and then reading this retrospective that Roger Ebert did, I see that love story peek through so much more, and you consider the things that Max has done and does do for her, for better or worse, and the fact that, they used to be married, and he had directed her, and now he dedicates his life to her as her butler, but he's more than that. He really is her caretaker, and that is just a kind of love and devotion that you want to be careful with. Let's be clear, this isn't the healthiest of situations, but it peeks through as something that also helps us have a greater understanding and acceptance of this character. Before William Holden was cast as Joe Gillis, Montgomery Clift was offered the role. But with the similarity with the previous role, he decided to leave the film. Of course, Billy Wilder and others did not take this particularly well, but it is speculated that his partner at the time, Libby Holman, was nervous that Cliff taking the role would make a mockery of their relationship. Holman was 14 years older than Cliff and had acted some, though the majority of her money was made through the inheritance by way of marriage, but just because of certain aspects of the relationship, it's possible that that was one of the reasons he didn't take this. Billy Wilder was furious with Cliff, and as a result, he was quoted as saying, "If he was any kind of actor, he could be convincing making love to a woman." Writer Charles Brackett did say that he and Wilder didn't want anyone else for the role of Norma Desmond other than Gloria Swanson. However, there were other actresses that were considered for the role. One being the pairing of Marlon Brando and Mae West. West turned down the role, refusing to play has-beens, and she still very much saw herself as someone who still very much mattered, as she should. Hardworking, we love her. The filmmakers had worked with Greta Garbo on Ninotchka, another one of my favorite films, and decided to ask her, but she said no. Former It girl Clara Bow declined, deciding to leave her former film career in the past. Norma Shear was retired and didn't like the script. Mary Pickford was considered, but Wilder realized she would find the script an insult. Fred MacMurray, who Wilder had worked with on Double Indemnity, was considered for the part of Joe. Unsure of what to do in the casting of Norma Desmond, Wilder turned to George Cukor, who recommended Gloria Swanson. During the time she was asked to screen test from the film, she was living and working in NYC. During this time, she was working on stage and in radio. Much to Swanson's chagrin, she was expected to submit a screen test. She responded in a very Norma Desmond way by saying, "I made 20 films for Paramount. Why do they want me to audition?" Cukor responded when asked if she was unreasonable. "If they ask you to do 10 screen tests, do 10 screen tests, or I will personally shoot you." Following Montgomery Clift's exit from the film, Wilder and Brackett put their sights on William Holden. They were impressed by his debut role 10 years earlier in Golden Boy. He served in the military following an appearance in the movie Our Town, and his return to Hollywood was moderately successful, but he wasn't really like William Holden yet. He accepted the role enthusiastically, and it is his role as Joe Gillis that put him at new heights, that rose him to new heights, and he would end up working with Billy Wilder again in Sabrina and a few other films, I believe, or maybe one more. Cinematographers are always important in film, and oftentimes it can be a very overlooked medium, as it is for a lot of people who are behind the scenes. And in film noir especially, it's hard to ignore how hard the cinematographer works to set up these scenes and give them something that makes them even more interesting. Cinematographer John L. Seltz, who had worked with Wilder before on Double Indemnity, Wilder trusted his judgment. He had worked on Double Indemnity and worked on several other films before, and he ended up letting him make his own decisions, and honestly, that worked so well for this movie. The fact that people were utilizing their own ideas and their own responses to the script, In one of the film's most well-known moments, the Midnight Chimp funeral, Sides asked Wilder what was required of the shot. Wilder replied with, "Just your standard monkey funeral shot." They had the option of shooting the film in color. To be more reflective of noirs, they chose to shoot the film in black and white. To shoot indoor scenes, Sides sprinkled dust in front of the camera before filming. This is to suggest mustiness. He had used this technique previously in Double Indemnity. Film historian Tom Staple writes of Seats. In both Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard, Seats does something that has always impressed me. Both are film noirs, and he finesses the fact that both are set in the sunniest of locales, Los Angeles. He brings together the light and the dark in the same film without any scenes showing. He brings together the realist lighting of Joe Gillis out in the real world with the gothic look of Norma Desmond's mansion. Sprinkle of dust on the lens really serves itself well to film noir in general, and it served itself very well to Double Indemnity, but it adds something a little extra to Sunset Boulevard, and that is when you're in the house of Norma Desmond. We know by her car and other things that we see in the film that she's not somebody who has needed like the newest things, and in many ways that is really good, especially from like a modern point of view, but also thinking about how she is so very stuck in time, and something about that sprinkling of dust gives us this sense of almost going back in time, and or having this completely different experience when you walk into the house of Norma Desmond. There are many things that come together to make Sunset Boulevard one of the best movies ever made. The direction by Billy Wilder, the script by Wilder, Charles Brackett, and D.M. Marshman Jr., the set design and cinematography, as well as the costume design by Edith Head. All of these things make this movie spectacular. More than that is also the experiences, the lived experiences by not only Gloria Swanson herself, but also by the various appearances from those that had worked in the film industry at the same time in which the character of Norma Desmond would. We've talked about how Gloria Swanson worked in film in the 1920s, but so did the actor who played Max. He even directed Gloria Swanson in a film. Unfortunately, he ended up leaving that film due to arguments with Swanson and the film's producer, Joseph P. Kennedy. Yeah, that Joseph P. Kennedy. This movie is actually shown in the film. It is the movie that is being played when Norma Desmond is showing her film to Joe Gillis, and Max is operating the projector from them. We also have appearances by Hedda Hopper at the end, who was a gossip columnist who started pretty early. She had worked in the industry, and she was a gossip columnist by the time this film ran out, and one of the biggest at the time. Her and gossip columnist Luella Parsons were big rivals. You also have Cecil B. DeMille making an appearance. The film that his character is filming, Samson and Delilah, he was actually filming that at the time that this movie was being made. And you also have Buster Keaton and two other of who would have been Norma Desmond's contemporaries, but who were Gloria Swanson's contemporaries at the time. And it is these certain aspects of the film that also have to do with luck, like the willingness for these people to participate in this film and how certain things came together. But it also just adds a lot of authenticity to this film and gives in an extra bit of that old Hollywood history and stuff that was Hollywood history at the time that this movie was made in 1950 and the time that it was released. I'm really glad that this film was successful at the time of its release in 1950, but that it has continued to receive praise over the years and it is loved by a number of people. If you have not seen this movie and you've gotten to this point, please go watch it. Where you can watch it is in the description box below. It's really hard for me to put into words why I think this movie is so great. I have already, but I don't think there's necessarily a highest praise that I can put into Sunset Boulevard. In the same way, it's hard for me to put into words how much I love The Apartment. These movies, The Apartment and Sunset Boulevard, deal with a lot of very serious things that occur in our lives and occur in our daily lives. And even though those specific experiences may not be our own, there is something that so many of us can relate to. And especially I think as somebody who was born in 1990, there's a lot of nostalgia that exists within anyone, but I think the way that it has affected millennials is very a big thing right now. It's something that's been talked about a lot, and so I think with that being said, I truly feel for Norma Desmond in a way that I don't think I did the first time that I watched this, and maybe I've watched it a long time ago, but now I've watched it with like a new a new set of eyes. So I highly recommend, when it comes to watching, if you haven't watched this movie in a long time, go watch it and see how maybe your perspective has changed on it. And I recommend Sunset Boulevard. I recommend like every movie that Billy Wilder has been involved with. Maybe not every single one, but most of them. And if you are having trouble getting someone that you want to check out some older movies, Billy Wilder is definitely the way to go. One of the best films of all time, Sunset Boulevard is often regarded as Billy Wilder's best film. To this day, the film is highly regarded and said to be the best film about Hollywood. A tremendous character study, Sunset Boulevard is a must-watch film noir that satirizes the worst of the film industry. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch and or listen to this video. I really appreciate it. I am having a really good time this year. I have got some new subscribers, probably like a much bigger influx than I have ever gotten before, and I know we're still like really low on it, very like small creator, but honestly, like, I don't care. Like, I want this channel to grow, but I also just love being able to, I don't know, I like being able to connect with people about classic films, and I love being able, and I love just watching this channel grow, really. Like, I, it's been fun. I like seeing how I've grown personally in the way that I talk about films, in the way that I write and record, and just my editing and all that. So thank you for being here and a part of the ride at the Quiet Riot. If you haven't already, subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and let me know if you've seen Sunset Boulevard, what you think about it. Let me know what your favorite Billy Wilder film is. I definitely want to talk more about Billy Wilder. I have discussed both The Apartment, which is my favorite film of all time, and Some Like It Hot, which is another one of my favorite films of all time. And now I'm talking about Sunset Boulevard, another one of my favorite films of all time. So I will definitely be talking more about Billy Wilder in the future, and I'm super excited to do that, and I'm excited to have you here, and we'll talk next time. Bye.